Good afternoon. We're doing another promotional video for our Biblical Exegesis Summer Institute. Want to give you another preview of some of what you can expect in our institute as we are helping teachers, Sunday school teachers, youth ministers, lay leaders better understand the Word of God. I want to turn to Genesis 16. So Genesis 16 is a passage that speaks of Sarah and Hagar. And as we talked about before, there's a couple of things, there's a whole bunch of things that goes into exegesis. One of it is delineating a passage. And so I'm going to make an argument for delineation of the passage, but I want to talk about a couple things that every teacher, every exegete should ask themselves as they're trying to do exegesis. First is observation, and we're going to talk about the many observations. And we're using this as a technical term in regards to looking for specific type of data when you are diving into the text. And so when we make an observation about that text, that observation ought to be able to be made by any other person. And then we go from observation to explanation. We need to explain what it is that we see in the text. And so if you were looking at this video, you could say an observation is that there is a white wall behind me. That would be an observation. That is an objective data analysis. And so we want to go, though, from observation to actually paying attention to what's in the text, to explaining what's in the text, to application. So you go from observation, explanation to application. I want us to just do a short little exercise. So Genesis 16, Sarai and Hagar. This is a New American Standard here, and you see how the New American Standard delineates this from verses 6, then 7, kind of a new thought, and that is possible. One of the reasons for this could be that you have a change in scenery, right? And so in verse 7, the Hagar has left and fled, and we're in the wilderness now, right? And so the angel finds her in the wilderness. So there's a change of scenery, and so that could be a reason to delineate from verse 6, as you see here, to verse 7. And again, how you divide up a passage and how you see the delineation can affect how you exegete the passage. So I'm going to build off of that little preview that I mentioned last time, and I'm going to make another observation. I'm going to give you another little bit of a preview. So one of the things that you'll learn in this is when we talk about observations, there is this element of contrast. And oftentimes in the narrative, within a narrative context, characters are being contrasted. It's called characterization. And we already know here that Hagar and Sarah have been contrasted. And there's some other contrast going on too. Contrast in comparisons, where Hagar, in some cases, looks like Abraham. And there's a lot going on with there. For example, Hagar is promised a descendants of many descendants, much like Abraham is, and so that's a whole other thing. But I want to make an argument for not only the delineation of this passage, but also talk about contrast and themes. So when we're making observations, one of the major things is themes. What is the theme of the passage or the pericope? One way you find out themes is through the repetition of words. So we're going to come back to that. And then remember this contrast or comparison type of dynamic. And then we're going to talk about, I'm going to introduce another thing, which is a potential inclusio idea. The idea of an inclusio is a type of literary tool. It's a thing that you use when you're writing. It's a type of literary tool, particularly used in scripture, that you start a thought with an idea and end that thought with the same idea. It's called an inclusio. It's a literary bracket. It's a way of creating a sandwich, a literary sandwich, if you will. And if you think about a sandwich, you have the bread, and then you have the things in the middle. And the things in the middle is what determines what type of sandwich it is. So I want to push against this delineation of the New American Standard, which justifiably breaks verse 6 and 7 off because there's a change of scenery. And I want to argue on the grounds of thematic issues, that verses 6 through 14 is probably a better delineation. So watch this. How does 6 start? Now, how does 6 start? One of the ways that we can even justify this is that we see in verses 1 through 5 that Sarah is, for the most part, the subject. She is the one that is the main actor in the scene. And oftentimes that can be seen through dialogue. She's the only one that talks in verses 1 through 5. Abraham does actions, but she talks. And it's only in verse 6, now Abraham talks. And here Abram, because his name has not been changed yet. And so that could be something. That could speak of something where now he is now viewed as the main actor of the scene. And but notice what he says. Here's what I want to make an argument for. In verse 6, it says, "But Abram said to Sarai, Behold, your maid is in your power to do to her what is good in your sight." And then we go to verses 13 and 14, which serves as a couplet in some ways, because 14 is just an explanation of verse 13 in some ways, that they go together. But verse 13 and 14, and then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are a God who sees." For she said, "Have I even remained alive after seeing him?" Therefore the well was called Be'er Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh Bered. And that is something like the one who sees, something along those lines. So there is this there's this focus on seeing and sight, right? And so if I begin to then talk about the theme of the passage, there's a focus on sight, not only a God who sees, which is said a couple times in verses 13 and 14. But even if you go back to verse 7, now the Lord found her by the spring of water in the wilderness. And this word spring, Hebrew word for spring, can also be word for eye, right? And so, if I take verse 7, as a place it could be, also can mean eye, and that same place is the place where she names in verse 14, right? And it has to do something with vision. Then this could be an inclusio, that you have this thought that is started with an idea and ends with an idea, and the theme of it is centered around this idea of vision and seeing. And so that also could be an argument for it starting at verse 7. But if I'm arguing that it actually could start at verse 6. So New American Standard has verse 7, but I'm arguing that you actually could start it with verse 6, especially if you understand it in the context of a contrast and comparison. So in verse 6, "But Abraham said to Sarai, Behold, your maid is in your power to do," literally, "the good thing that is in your eyes." And so now we have this, and there's an interesting contrast that's going on here, because Sarai, in her, when she sees Hagar, she sees an opportunity to oppress her. So the very next verse, the very next section, the very next line says, so Sarai treated her harshly. If you contrast that with verse 13, then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees. And earlier, in between verses 6 and 13, the angel says, the Lord has taken notice or taken heed, in this case, of your vision, of your oppression, right? And so what is it that he sees? He sees her affliction. He sees her oppression. And which means that there's this connection between what Sarai sees when she sees Hagar and what Yahweh sees when he sees Hagar. When she sees Hagar, she sees Hagar, sees her as an opportunity to oppress. But when Yahweh sees Hagar, he sees her as an opportunity to bless. And so you have this contrast here. And I even actually talked about this in for Mother's Day, as we talk about observation, explanation, and then application. The observation is that we have verses 6 and verses 13, 14, this couplet is connected with the theme of vision and sight. And the part of the explanation is that this could potentially be understood as an inclusio. And when the significance of it could be that this is creating a literary bracket around a thought. And so you have this contrast, right? The contrast is another observation, the contrast between what Sarah sees and what Yahweh sees. When Sarah sees is an opportunity to oppress. So she treated her harshly. The good thing in her eyes was that her oppression of Hagar was justified. And so in this contrast, it brings out the application for us. She says to Yahweh, Hagar, you are the God who sees. On yesterday for Mother's Day, I talked about a message to the mother, and I talked about a God who sees you, right? And in what context is Hagar seen? She is seen in her oppression, and the question is, what is Hagar's oppression? It's not just the fact that it's not just Sarah. Yeah, no, there's something specifically that is done. And if you go back and read, there are a couple of these verbs are important. She took Hagar and she gave to Abraham. And then even before, Abraham says, she is in your power. She's in your hand. She's in your power to do as you will, to do the good thing that is in your sight. What is her affliction? What is Hagar's affliction? Hagar's affliction is powerlessness, and therefore she flees. What do you do when you feel like you are powerless? Right? And this is part of her oppression. And as I talked about application, particularly to a congregation of African-American mothers, I talked about the various ways that African-American mothers have felt powerless in America. Right? Whether it's been dealing with racism and raising sons in a context that marginalizes their Blackness, or just as a mother, right, who's dealt with every mother can relate to the idea that you as a mother have felt powerless, and it's in that context that Hagar says, you are the God that sees me. This is just there's so much else we can bring up out of this, but I just want to give you some sense of what you can expect. We are going to be talking about observations. We're going to be talking about contrast and literary forms. We're going to be talking about genre. We're going to be talking about discourse analysis. There's so much. Listen, you are going to be getting a top-notch education. We're not going to pull any punches. We're going to lay it all on the table. And I hope that you would join me in this effort as we are trying to address the issue of biblical illiteracy and help people become more biblically competent interpreters. I pray, pastors, this is probably not new information to you, but maybe you need a refresher. One way you can get this refresher for free is have 5 people in your congregation sign up, and then you can come for free. It'll be $75 for 6 weeks. That's part 1. We encourage you to take part 2 to get full, to optimize and maximize your experience. If you take the first session and then register for the second session, you'll get a $10 discount. This is really about $12 per class, and you're going to have an hour-and-a-half session. It really is a steal. So I'm not trying to make a whole bunch of money here, but yes, I am charging something, but it is minimal. So I want you to be a part of this. I want you, Sunday school teachers, youth workers, young adults. You have a young adult ministry. We are always talking about, I'm gonna put out another video in a few days about why this is important for urban apologetics, and our young adults who are being being driven and compelled to go to some of these other Black religious identity cultural groups that are oftentimes coming with pseudo scholarship, and we want to prepare the church. We want to enable the church to be able to respond to these things. And so please come on and join us. We're trying to have at least 2 classes of 25 people each. There's still time, there's still room. If you know somebody who can benefit from this, we want them to come. So maybe you can sponsor somebody, maybe you can pay for someone. Please come and be a part of this. So we thank you so much, and may God bless you. I'm asking you again to join, share this video, tag somebody in this video, so that they can join the Biblical Exegesis Summer Institute. You can sign up with the link below. Go straight to Jot Form, sign, we'll get the information, and then send your registration either through Cash App and Zelle, and you will receive a syllabus within a week. We're working on the syllabus. We're getting things together. We're looking forward to this time, this Biblical Exegesis Summer Institute. May God bless you.